I found my wife in the arms of another man at a party, while I was just a few feet away. What I did next changed everything. Welcome to Amelia's stories. Stay with me because these real-life stories of love, betrayal, and heartbreak will leave you thinking about what trust really means. If you're new here, tell me where you're watching from in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Jackson was 32, the kind of man who worked hard, kept his promises, and believed that loyalty was the foundation of love. His wife Emma was 29, charming, social, and someone everyone thought was the perfect partner. To outsiders they looked like the couple everyone admired, strong, stable, and deeply in love. Jackson believed that too until one night proved him wrong. They went together to a friend's birthday party. At first, everything seemed fine. Emma laughed, greeted people, and floated from one conversation to another. But Jackson noticed something different. She was restless, distracted, and her eyes seemed to be searching for someone. Every now and then she slipped away from the crowd. Jackson brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she just needed air, but the feeling in his chest grew heavier with each passing minute. Finally, he decided to look for her. He walked through the house, then toward the backyard. And there, under the dim garden lights, his world broke apart. Emma stood in Ryan's arms, her co-worker. They weren't just talking. She was kissing him like she had forgotten Jackson even existed. Jackson froze. The sound of music and laughter from inside blurred into nothing. His chest burned with betrayal. This was the woman he had trusted with everything, the woman he had defended and supported through every struggle. And here she was, giving her love to another man. But Jackson didn't shout. He didn't walk up to them. Instead he turned around, his steps heavy but steady. He walked out of the party quietly, not saying a word. His heart felt like it was shattering, but his pride kept him silent. Emma never saw him. She didn't even know that her husband had just witnessed everything that would change their marriage forever. Jackson gripped the steering wheel tighter than ever as he drove home alone. The road stretched ahead in silence, but inside his chest, it felt like a storm was raging. His mind played back the scene again and again. Emma in Ryan's arms, kissing him without hesitation as if their marriage meant nothing. Every second behind the wheel felt heavier, his thoughts louder than the hum of the engine. He thought about the years they had spent together. The nights he stayed up late working extra shifts so Emma could chase her dreams without worry. The times he put his own wants aside so she could shine in her career. Every sacrifice he had made came rushing back to him now, and it cut even deeper knowing the trust he gave her had been thrown away so carelessly. Jackson wasn't the type to scream or cause a scene. That wasn't him. Instead, his silence spoke louder than words. He had walked out of that party with a heart full of fire, but his face stayed calm. And now, as the city lights passed by outside the car window, he realized he wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. His hurt was too raw, too sharp. He needed time to think, to breathe, to figure out what his next move would be. When he finally reached home, the house felt unbearably empty. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts racing in circles. The clock ticked on, but Jackson couldn't sleep. He replayed Emma's laughter, her promises, the way she once swore he was the only man she could ever love. Now those words felt like lies, echoes of a person he didn't recognize anymore. Hours later, he heard the door creak open softly. Emma slipped inside, moving quietly like a teenager sneaking back after curfew. She thought she was clever, thought he had been asleep this whole time. She tiptoed around, slipped into bed, and curled up beside him as if nothing had happened. Jackson didn't move. He didn't say a word. His eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, his heart heavy but his mind sharp. He knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of what he would do next. Morning light slipped through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. Emma stirred first, stretching lightly before turning toward Jackson. Normally, he would greet her with a warm smile or a quiet good morning, but today his eyes were fixed on the ceiling, his expression unreadable. His stillness was sharp, his silence louder than any words. Emma sat up slowly, brushing her hair back, trying to sound casual. "Morning," she said, her tone light as though nothing in the world was wrong. She hoped her voice wouldn't betray the nervousness she felt inside. Jackson turned his head slightly, his gaze calm but heavy. "How was the party?" he asked, his voice steady, almost too steady. The question caught Emma off guard. For a split second her chest tightened, but she forced a smile, hoping he hadn't noticed. "Oh, it was fine," she replied quickly. "I was just talking with friends, you know how it is." Jackson didn't respond right away. He studied her, his eyes holding hers long enough to make her shift uncomfortably. He didn't shout, didn't accuse. just watched her as if he could see straight through the flimsy excuse she'd wrapped herself in. Inside, his anger simmered, but on the surface he was calm, almost too calm. Emma felt the weight of his gaze but convinced herself he was simply tired. She let out a small laugh and got out of bed, moving toward the kitchen as if breakfast could erase the tension in the room. She thought she had covered her tracks well, thought her lie was safe behind her smile. Jackson, still lying there, knew better. Every word she spoke felt like another crack in the foundation of their marriage. Yet he stayed silent, letting her believe her story had worked. His face gave away nothing, but his mind was already turning, already piecing together what her dishonesty meant. As Emma busied herself humming lightly to mask the unease she felt, Jackson sat on the edge of the bed, calm on the outside but burning on the inside. He wouldn't confront her now. For the moment he would let her think she still held control. But deep down he knew the truth, and that knowledge changed everything. It took Jackson a few days before he finally spoke. The silence between them had grown heavier, and Emma had begun to notice how distant he was. One evening as they sat in the living room, Jackson put his phone down and looked directly at her. His calm tone carried a weight that made Emma's stomach twist. "I saw you with Ryan at the party," he said quietly. Emma froze. Her breath caught in her throat as her mind scrambled for a response. "What? No? You must be mistaken," she stammered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. "Ryan and I were just—" "Don't lie to me," Jackson interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "I know what I saw." Her face went pale and panic rushed through her body. For a moment she tried to hold on to denial, shaking her head and insisting it wasn't true. But the intensity of Jackson's gaze broke her down. Tears welled in her eyes as her defenses crumbled. "I'm sorry," she cried, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was drunk, I wasn't thinking. It was a mistake, just a stupid mistake." Her voice shook as she reached for him, desperate to close the space between them. "Please, Jackson, you have to believe me. I love you. It didn't mean anything." Jackson leaned back, his expression unreadable. The sight of her crying didn't move him the way it once might have. He had given her his trust and she had thrown it away. "You had a choice, Emma," he said quietly. "And you made it." She sobbed harder, grabbing at his arm, begging him to forgive her, promising it would never happen again. But Jackson stayed still, his voice calm but cold. "I need time to think," he said, pulling his arm away. The words cut Emma deeper than if he had shouted. For the first time she realized her secret wasn't just discovered. It had destroyed the safety she thought she had in her marriage. Fear crept into her heart, heavier than guilt. For the first time she felt the very real possibility that she might lose him forever. Jackson didn't explode in anger the way Emma feared. Instead, his silence grew colder by the day. He no longer argued, no longer sought her company, no longer reached for her hand. The warmth that once defined their marriage had vanished, replaced by a sharp distance that Emma could feel but couldn't measure. She mistook it at first for hurt that would pass, but Jackson knew better. He wasn't interested in forgiveness, he was interested in the truth. When Emma wasn't watching, he started digging. Late at night, while she showered or stepped outside to make a call, Jackson went through her phone with quiet precision. He combed through text messages, noting the affectionate words she had tried to delete. He checked her call logs, memorizing the frequency of Ryan's number. Credit card statements and receipts revealed dinners she had claimed were work meetings. Each detail was another piece of the puzzle, and Jackson collected them with steady determination. But he didn't stop there. He reached out to Claire, Ryan's girlfriend. Their first conversation was awkward, heavy with suspicion and unspoken dread. Yet within minutes, it became clear they were on the same side. Claire had noticed Ryan's sudden late nights, the unexplained absences, the lies about company events she knew never happened. Together they compared timelines, messages, and stories. What Jackson feared became undeniable. Emma's betrayal wasn't a single drunken mistake. It had been going on for months, perhaps longer. Every detail Claire shared felt like another knife to the chest. But instead of collapsing under the pain, Jackson's resolve hardened. His heartbreak transformed into something sharper, quiet fury. He realized Emma hadn't only betrayed him once. She had built her lies carefully, thinking he would never see through them. The weight of years he had sacrificed for her now burned like fuel inside him. Jackson didn't yell or confront her with what he knew, not yet. Instead, he played his part, letting her think she still had control. But inside, he was no longer the loyal, trusting husband she once knew. He was a man with a plan, gathering every shred of truth he needed to make sure when the time came, Emma's lies would collapse around her with no way out. Emma felt the shift like a weight pressing down on her chest. Jackson wasn't the same. He no longer laughed at her jokes or looked at her with warmth. The silence between them stretched longer every day, and she could feel him slipping away. Panic began to grow inside her. She tried everything she thought might bring him back. One evening she cooked his favorite meal, setting the table carefully, even pouring his drink just the way he liked it. Jackson thanked her politely but ate in silence, offering no smile, no softness. Another night she reached for his hand on the couch, leaning against him the way she used to. He shifted slightly, muttered something about being tired and went to bed early. The rejection cut her deeper each time. In desperation she tried to close the distance with affection, even intimacy, but Jackson pulled away gently, always with the same excuses. He was busy, he was tired, he had things on his mind. His calm refusals hurt more than anger would have. She couldn't understand why her efforts fell flat, but deep down, fear began to claw at her heart. At night, when Jackson finally drifted into a quiet sleep, Emma lay awake with tears streaming down her face. She muffled her sobs into the pillow, terrified he would hear her, terrified he already knew more than he let on. The thought of losing him haunted her. For the first time she realized her grip on their marriage was breaking. While she cried in the dark, Jackson remained composed. His distance wasn't aimless. It was deliberate. Each cold response, each rejection was part of the quiet wall he was building between them. He had no intention of giving her comfort. Instead, he focused on the evidence he continued to gather. More messages, more proof, more confirmations of what she had done. Emma thought she was fighting for their love, but Jackson wasn't fighting at all. He was preparing. Every document he saved, every detail he collected, was another step toward the moment he would expose her completely. She wept for the marriage she was losing, while he sharpened the truth that would end it once and for all. Jackson waited until everything was perfectly in place before making his move. When he finally suggested a dinner, his tone was calm, almost casual. He told Emma it was time to clear the air and move forward. Her heart lifted with hope. Maybe he was ready to forgive, maybe he wanted to fix things. She clung to that fragile thought and agreed without hesitation. The night of the dinner arrived and the four of them sat around the table. Jackson, Emma, Ryan, and Claire. The atmosphere was heavy, but Emma tried to smile, her nerves hidden behind forced laughter. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Claire's eyes burned with quiet resentment. Jackson, on the other hand, looked perfectly composed, as though nothing in the world could shake him. The meal passed slowly until Jackson set his fork down and reached into his bag. Without a word, he placed a stack of papers on the table. Emma's smile faltered as she recognized the printouts. Messages between her and Ryan, words she thought she had hidden. Then Jackson pressed play on his phone, and recordings of whispered conversations filled the silence of the restaurant corner. The effect was instant. Ryan's face drained of color, his jaw tightening as the reality of exposure sank in. Claire leaned back with a bitter smirk, vindication flashing in her eyes as the truth she had suspected all along spilled into the open. Emma's entire body shook. Tears blurred her vision, and her hands trembled as she reached for Jackson. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's not what it looks like. I can explain." But Jackson didn't raise his voice. He didn't rage, didn't curse. He simply looked at each of them in turn and said, "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are." His calm words cut sharper than any scream ever could. Emma's sobs filled the silence as Jackson stood up, adjusting his jacket with steady hands. Ryan remained frozen. Claire watched with satisfaction, and Emma reached out desperately, begging him not to leave. But Jackson didn't stop. He walked out with measured steps, leaving Emma in tears at the table, her world crumbling around her. For the first time she realized she had lost him completely. The night air was cold as Jackson pushed open the restaurant doors and walked into the parking lot. His steps were steady, his face calm, but inside he felt the weight of finality. Behind him, Emma's chair screeched against the floor as she bolted after him, her sobs echoing into the night. "Jackson, please," she cried, her heels clicking against the pavement as she caught up to him. She grabbed his arm, tears streaming down her face. "It meant nothing, I swear to you. I love you, only you. Please don't walk away from us." Jackson turned slowly, his expression cold, his eyes empty of the warmth she had always relied on. "I loved you once," he said, his voice low but steady. "But the woman I loved doesn't exist anymore." The words hit her harder than any shout could. She shook her head violently, clutching at his sleeve like a lifeline slipping away. "No, you can't mean that. I made a mistake, Jackson. Just one mistake. Don't throw everything away. Don't throw me away. Her voice cracked, her chest heaving with desperation. But Jackson didn't flinch. He gently pulled his arm free, his gaze locked on her for a moment longer. Then without another word he unlocked his car and slid inside. Emma's sobs grew louder, echoing through the empty lot. She pressed her hands against the window, begging him to listen, to give her another chance. Jackson started the engine, his jaw tight but his eyes forward. He didn't look back, not even once. The car pulled out of the lot, its taillights glowing briefly before disappearing into the night. Emma stumbled backward, her knees giving way as she fell onto the cold pavement. Her cries turned into broken gasps, her body shaking uncontrollably. The weight of reality crushed her. Jackson was gone, and this time he wasn't coming back. In that moment, surrounded by nothing but her own regret, she realized the full cost of her betrayal. She hadn't just lost his trust. She had lost the man who had once loved her more than anything. Alone in the dark, Emma collapsed into tears, knowing she had destroyed the only thing that truly mattered. Jackson moved with precision, every step deliberate. Within days he had gathered his files, the proof neatly organized in folders that spoke louder than words ever could. Texts, call logs, receipts, airtight evidence that left no room for denial. He walked into his lawyer's office calmly, handed over the documents and instructed them to proceed with divorce. There was no hesitation, no wavering. He wanted this chapter closed, clean and final. Emma, blindsided by the papers, tried to reach out. She called, texted, even showed up at his door, but Jackson never engaged in arguments. His responses, when necessary, were short and professional. He wasn't interested in fights or dramatic confrontations. He made sure everything was handled through lawyers, stripping her of the emotional leverage she once held. For Emma, the coldness cut deeper than anger ever could. When friends and family learned the truth, the tide turned quickly. Many had admired their marriage, but with the evidence laid bare, support poured in for Jackson. His loyalty, his sacrifices, his quiet strength, it all came into focus. People who once praised Emma now looked at her with disappointment, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the betrayal she had committed. Emma spiraled. The walls of her carefully built image collapsed around her. She cried to anyone who would listen, insisting it was a mistake, that she still loved Jackson, but the sympathy she sought never came. Instead, she was left with the crushing realization that her choices had cost her the man who had stood by her through everything. Meanwhile, Jackson began piecing his life back together, one day at a time. He spent evenings with friends who reminded him of laughter he had forgotten. He poured himself into his work, finding purpose and clarity in moving forward. Slowly, the weight on his chest began to lift. The wounds were still there, but each step forward proved he was stronger than the pain she had left behind. For Jackson, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding. His future was his own again, and for the first time in a long time he felt free. Weeks passed and Jackson settled into his new life with quiet strength. The paperwork was moving forward, his focus had shifted to work, and he had started to find peace in the small routines of his day. But one evening, a familiar knock echoed through his home. When he opened the door, Emma stood there, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling as she whispered his name. "Jackson, please. I can't do this anymore," she said, her hands shaking as she reached toward him. "I made the worst mistake of my life. Losing you, losing us, it's tearing me apart. Please just give me one more chance. I'll do anything. I can't live without you." Jackson stood in the doorway, his expression calm, his eyes steady. He let her speak, let the desperation spill out of her in broken sobs. She clutched at his arm, trying to pull him back into the life they once shared, but he didn't move. Inside, he felt the weight of all the nights he had given her trust, the sacrifices he had made, and the pain of watching it all crumble. When she finally paused, waiting for his answer, Jackson's voice was quiet but firm. "You made your choice at that party," he said, each word deliberate, sharp as glass. "This is mine." Emma's breath hitched as though the air had been ripped from her lungs. Her tears flowed harder, her body shaking with the realization that his decision was final. She begged again, her voice cracking, but Jackson didn't waver. With a steady hand he closed the door, the soft click sealing the end of everything they had once been. On the porch, Emma collapsed, her sobs filling the night air as she pressed her face into her hands. The weight of regret consumed her. She had destroyed the only love that had truly mattered. Inside, Jackson walked back into the quiet of his home. For the first time in a long while, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy with betrayal or loneliness. It was freeing. He exhaled deeply, the chains of her betrayal finally broken. Emma wept outside, but Jackson was done. He was free.